Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Aida Dargahi. I am the Director of Humanities Lecture Series at Foothill College. I'm also Professor of Humanities here at Foothill College. The Humanities Lecture Series seeks to promote students and public interest in the humanistic aspect of our culture, to understand ourselves as members of diverse communities and citizens of one nation. Our public lectures and presentations may address enduring or emerging questions central to the arts and the humanities, or questions arising from our disciplines to which the arts and the humanities might speak. In pre-pandemic days, our presentations would happen on campus, but now we are doing it via Zoom. Tonight, we are going to have a 45-minute of lecture, followed by a 15-minute Q&A. Given the size of the audience, your microphones will be muted. Please type your questions in the chat box. One more important housekeeping note. For those of you wishing to earn extra credit, I will ask you at the end of the presentation to type your name, class, and your professor's name in the chat box to earn credit. This way you can earn credit. I am very pleased to have our first equity lecture from our equity-related series during the Black History Month, as we are committed to social justice. We have a dynamic speaker tonight, and it's my honor to introduce him to you. Koorosh Ostowari is a somatic trauma therapist. From 2009 to 2019, he worked with thousands of incarcerated men and women as a spirituality and communication teacher at the local jail in Marin County. He offered a combination of tools for men and women during the weekly classes to support them to heal old wounds, traumas, dysfunctional patterns, and habits that often lead to incarceration. Mr. Ostowari has been officially acknowledged as a local leader for change by the U.S. Congress for his work at the jail. Without further ado, here is Koorosh Ostowari.
Aida, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, and it's such an honor to be with you all. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this evening. I know there's so much going on, and we all have so much on our plates, and it's certainly we're in a very interesting times. But this is exactly what we need. We need a space for us to all come together and just share ideas and put some ideas and thoughts on the table and pick and choose whatever it is that supports us to move forward in our lives, not just as individuals, but in our community, to try to make some kind of difference that establishes equity, which, by the way, I'll define a little bit from my point of view. The terminology of equity around fairness, justice, the formulation of public policy, and the implementation of public policy are really essential, and also holding folks accountable who are in charge of these policies. But I really want to acknowledge all of you, because you're all doing something very special in your own community. and even if that community is just in your own home or in your own neighborhood, that's a lot to acknowledge, and it's a lot to really hold with gratitude. So I just wanted to put that out there. You know, the first thing I want to also acknowledge is that we've got more than one pandemic going on right now. COVID-19 has been both a horrible, situation and disease, but it's been in some ways, sometimes I'm like, thank you, COVID. You actually brought a lot of peace in my own household, and you slowed things down for us, and I've been able to take a pause and breathe, and I'm sure you can relate to that. Connect with our families and look at our priorities in life, and also create some big changes. You know, I mean, I won't go into politics too much, but even maybe the last administration. So in a way, COVID has been a good teacher for all of us. And unfortunately, it's been awful for a lot of people, especially folks that are experiencing inequity. So the other pandemics, you know, that fall under the category of inequity are very clear and obvious to me. I experienced, you know, I mean, a lot of the end result of and the byproduct of a system that caused inequity, and it led to folks ending up in jail. And I'll talk a little bit about that. But I just want to kind of create you know, the premise for this evening, because originally I was like, what am I going to tell these folks? I mean, what is it that they don't already know? And so I'm just going to repeat a lot of things you probably have heard. If some of it resonates, great. If some things don't, great. At least you came and we're hanging out as a community, and that's worth a lot. But the other things that really are, to me, the biggest issues that we're facing in our society, that to me is a pandemic, is systematic racism, poverty, you've got discrimination, you've got, and by the way, add anything you want in the chat box, anything else that is leading to, you know, a situation in our communities and in our society that's kind of spiraling out of control, that's actually widening the gap between, you know, the haves, the have-nots, the whites, the blacks, people of color, you know, the people who are rich or poor. So you're welcome to share your ideas in the chat box, or any other thoughts or ideas you have. But I mean, I just want to really acknowledge that I think we're all here tonight to explore bridge building. Like what is it like to build a bridge to narrow the divide, you know, that has gotten really wide. And so I just want to say I'm really grateful to be able to just touch on my contribution as a bridge builder, mostly in the local jail. And I'd love to hear about how you're building bridges in your own lives, and working towards equity. I love Helen Keller's quote around life is either it's either a daring adventure or it's really nothing at all, you know? I mean, I wouldn't go to that extreme, but it's really something to think about. If at any time we're falling into the place of being too comfortable, or in complacency, or being a bystander, then we have to ask ourselves, what am I doing that is actually either hurting the cause or the movement, or an issue or a situation that's just kind of really needs to be addressed. And Martin Luther King actually said it best: if you're just kind of watching a situation unfold that you know is not just, and you know is causing harm, if you're not doing something about it, then it's possible that we're contributing to it. So again, building bridges. As bridge builders, what are we doing to actually connect, not just with one another, but with people with opposing views, different ideas, different suggestions, or different outlook? I have a neighbor here who's amazing. His name is Mike. He's got not just one flag in front of his house, he's got like 3 or 4 of them. I mean, like half the block it's got these flags, and God bless him, he's a patriot, and he's got a little sticker on the back of his truck that says, I'm a terrorist hunter. He doesn't have anything around, well, I'm going to hunt down, the Proud Boys or the, 3%ers or whoever they are. But I decided to invite Mike over for dinner, and we actually, I thought, what a way to actually build a bridge with someone who has really a different outlook around, who we are. He's a white, wealthy, successful American who thinks immigrants are, they're dangerous, they're taking over. And so during dinner, we really had a really deep conversation around the root of the problem. Why are immigrants coming? And what is really going on, especially when he complains about, folks coming from, the big caravan, right? Coming from El Salvador, Honduras, or Guatemala. And I had to remind him, Mike, listen, you understand what our involvement and why they're coming. They actually don't want to come. They're happy in their own country. It's probably because we went there and really did a lot of damage. What if we did something to go back and build up their infrastructure and really gave them an incentive to stay where they are and enjoy their lives? And you know what he did? He looked back at me and said, Koorosh, that's not a bad idea. That's really true, isn't it? And I'm like, yeah, I think we should explore this together. So here's a person with totally extreme views around equity. He's a true patriot, God bless him, but he's also very protective of his territory, his country. He thinks if I'm brown or if you look different than him, that maybe you're a threat. But after that evening, something shifted. The other thing I want to put on the table that's really important when we talk about equity, I want to really make sure that we understand 2 things that are really going on. You got injustices happening with humanity, and it's awful, and it's right there in front of us. But you also have another big thing that's going on. Can you guess what that is? It's the environment. The environment needs to be a part of the social justice conversation, or just equity conversation, because we can really work towards equity and create a level playing field for folks to feel included and to feel encouraged and brought into various environments that or maybe there was a pattern of keeping them out. But we also need to address the environment. You've got nature really suffering. You've got animals suffering. You've got habitat destruction. You've got climate change. All those things. So I want to bring that in as well. So you've got equity covering these 2 areas, and they're actually really connected. I listened to a really great conversation today on the radio, KQED. London Breed was on, and she, I love that woman. She's amazing, the mayor of San Francisco. And when she talked about the problems that we're having in San Francisco about crime, she mentioned the word accountability, I think at least 10 times. We need to hold each other accountable. We need to hold folks who break the laws accountable. We need to be proactive and actually go into those communities and find out why people are losing it and they're actually engaging in criminal activity. We need to really engage in drug treatment programs, right? I mean, that's really important. We need to focus on rehabilitation. And then, of course, there's a whole thing about transitionary support that needs to happen when people are in jail and when they get out, and then the big one, housing. So what I'd like to touch on a little bit is, you're probably wondering, how is a Persian guy who migrated here in 1971 end up working at a local jail? I ask myself that question a lot. You know, we came here as immigrants, like all immigrants. Now, I didn't walk across the border. We actually came here on a Pan Am, 1971. I remember I was 9 years old, and we landed here in America with a dream to, like most immigrants, to try to make it. But we also came with a lot of false narratives and stories around the culture. In Iran, you know, the majority of the media, films, movies, portrayed African Americans as being, you know, killers, robbers, pimps, prostitutes. And in our mind, as we were migrating here, we're like, oh my God, this is going to be scary, right? On the other hand, we saw the American Indians portrayed as savages, barbarians, and people that have to be eradicated. And who was our savior? Well, good old John, the big white guy, he's going to protect us, right? That didn't happen, actually. When we came here, we immediately experienced a lot of discrimination. The first thing that happened, the first day of school, I was beat up by the white guys, and pretty much that went on probably for, I would say, for a good 10 years. And when I attended a school in the 70s down in the peninsula, there were riots every Friday because there was segregation. All the African Americans were bussed over to our high school, and every Friday there was a riot. And I didn't know what side to take. So I was being beat up by the white folks and then the black folks as well. But what I wanted to really point out is that something that happened, that we did have the American, you know, immigration dream to come here and try to make it, but we also ended up in poverty because my father actually bailed on us. So my mom ended up being a single mother with 3 kids, and really experienced this. It was just a very painful experience to see a mom who couldn't speak English, who didn't get child support, who really didn't have any education, and try to support 3 kids. And then it also really highlighted the whole question of the complex patriarchal story that sometimes feeds inequity, right? And this toxic masculinity. Okay, I'm going to try to pronounce that properly. Toxic masculinity. Which is a very old, universal issue that really got exposed here in America. Now, growing up without a father was really painful. You know, we really didn't have a role model. And what I noticed about a lot of the students in the jail, they also didn't have a lot of role models, especially the men. They didn't have men helping them really go through the rites of passage. A lot of the girls or women didn't have fathers holding them. And, you know, so I grew up with a chip on my shoulder and a lot of pain and a lot of constriction. And on a somatic level, there was just a complete disconnect. And so I was walking around with a lot of pain and almost felt like I had one foot on the gas pedal and one on the brakes. And I was always tense and always tight and upset. And a lot of the stories that were going on were in my head, you know, around safety. And, you know, there was a lot of pain and suffering, but there was also a lot that was going on in my head, you know, around, am I going to make it? Am I enough? Am I going to be worthy? I'm telling you all these stories because it really was the only way I could actually access this institutional type setting where I could actually go into a system called the jail, local jail, and actually be able to relate to the folks there. I needed to really experience my own pain and suffering so I could also relate and have empathy for the pain and suffering of the inmates. It was a very scary journey for me, but I had to kind of go through this process of finally leaving my business at age 35 and saying, you know what, I've got to unravel this really deep, painful thing, this place that didn't feel enough and was wounded and hurt. And that's when I got into the whole somatic practice, which is really a practice of trying to kind of unravel the areas where there was this stuckness and come to a place of some kind of a peace and understanding and resolution. But I'm sharing this background story because what really was the key for me to get out of this trauma vortex, is what I want to call it, was the use and the practice of play, of self-reflection, but it was a lot of creative expression and a lot of ways to try to use, practice mindfulness, a way of being present with our situation, along with some kind of a skillful communications to be able to tap into the healing process. I wanted to just really be honest that from my point of view, it feels like the jails and prisons are designed to perpetuate the cycles of inequity, suffering that's often built on poverty, prejudice, as well as profit by the very institution that tries to rehabilitate them or tries to utilize the punishment model. The tragic irony in all this is that the system at its core is really flawed. So the reason I say this, because it's really easy to say, you know what, we're gonna judge and criminalize the poor, the haves, the have-nots, the mentally ill, people of color, and kind of like make them our focus, at least the institutions focus, but not put as much focus on the well-to-do criminals, the bankers, the politicians, the people who had means to be able to hire the best attorneys and to be able to get the best support, and usually often didn't end up doing much time or any time whatsoever. What I really realized for me, and was to continue to cultivate this process of, really trying to unravel my own trauma, build enough empathy and compassion for myself. And for some really interesting reason, after I completed a 5-year program as a I don't know, it was a Buddhist practitioner over at Spirit Rock, and then got certified as a trauma therapist, I decided, you know what? Let me see if I could go work with the inmates at the local jail and teach them how to play, teach them how to have fun, teach them how to kind of rewire their nervous system so that they could remember who they really are. Do you guys remember when we were kids? We were uninhibited, right? We would play, have fun, run around, use imaginary games. We would problem solve together. We would build bonds together, alliances, it was, and it still is, our true essence, actually. That part that really knows how to be free. And then what happened along the way, right? And I'm sharing this with you because this is sort of what I had to really try to understand when I went into the jail, is that the only way to access these individuals who were there, men, women, people like us, actually, men, women, grandmothers, grandfathers, people of all backgrounds, mostly people of color, uh, who, for a lot of reasons, ended up falling through the cracks. Some actually were desperate and had to steal baby food or diapers, and ended up there. Some were just bystanders in an environment or a situation. They ended up there. But the bottom line is, every single person there was interested in finding true freedom. I don't think in the 10 years I worked there, from 2010 to about 2020, I don't think I met anyone there that wasn't interested in experiencing peace and joy and fun and happiness. They all want what we want, actually. But what really is going on, that and I'm going to get into specifics of the folks that I've worked with, but the sad reality is, again, we have a system that punishes, really focuses on punishment, rather than true understanding of rehabilitation, while it actually kind of doesn't treat the well-to-do, the lobbyists, the leaders, the corporate CEOs, the banker, or the hedge fund managers. And a lot of them, by the way, did come into the jail, but ended up leaving rather quickly. But what's really sad and tragic is that the system that's set up, really doesn't understand that when someone is really desperate and they steal a loaf of bread, they're not a criminal. On the other hand, if someone steals $1 million, they're not a businessman, because they're considered, oh yeah, now he's got a little bit of some status because he stole big money. And why is it that if you steal billions of dollars, suddenly you're called this brilliant, intelligent financiers? The truth is, what happened with George Floyd is symbolic of what's really going on in our justice system and in our capitalistic system. There's a knee on the neck of those who can't breathe, who are struggling to survive, and who end up in a system designed mostly to profit from their mistakes and suffering, as opposed to rehabilitation. And the root of the problem, I feel, is racism, sexism, inequity, domination by the powerful, greedy, and privileged aspects of our society. Now, let's talk a little bit about the mental health and policing in the prison industrial complex. Let's just be clear: the police often do not represent their community, or the community. The community policing that should be happening is not happening as much as it used to. I mean, certain cultures still have community policing. I mean, the brothers and sisters, uncles and aunts, and the elders are there to really support anyone who's about to fall through the cracks, or even after they've fallen through the cracks. And but in our system, because it's built on this profit model, actually there's a conflict of interest built into the system, because it's become a really safe, secure network of individuals who feel secure in having a job, feel secure in filling the beds. Kind of like having an apartment complex where you need to rent out all the apartments. They actually felt insecure in having all the prisoners rehabilitated and released. So when I walked into the jail, first of all, I want to say, the first year I walked in, I was scared to death. I mean, I'm like, what am I going to do here? Am I going to say the right thing? Am I going to be able to be present? Am I going to be able to do anything? I mean, am I going to live? Am I going to die? And what's going to happen? I mean, that was real. And the second year, I finally just coming down the elevator, by the way, the Marin County Jail, if some of you know, maybe hopefully you don't, but if you do, it's this Frank Lloyd Wright designed complex. It's round about I'd say 80 feet in diameter. It's like 4 levels going into the ground about 60, 70 feet. So there's like 4 levels, 4 pods, where each of them have a little patio where we used to meet when I walked in a couple times a week. And you had the women in one level, you had the men on one level, you had the really severely challenged individuals on another level, and then on another level, there were the very hardcore criminals that on occasions we used to have the hardcore criminals if they were young and, you know, like an 18-year-old lady came down to the women's level and hung out in our classes, who was involved in a murder while they were on meth or something like that in Marin. It was really a sad story. But they're people like our mothers and fathers and sometimes generations of people who would end up in jail. But here's some stats. 20% of the folks who end up in jail are mentally disturbed or challenged. They have a real challenge around their basic human needs. I mean, with shelter, with food, with safety, with a feeling of belonging. You know, on top of that, maybe not having the best coping skills to deal with stress. I mean, how would you handle it just having, you know, not having a place to sleep one night? Imagine. I mean, it's very, very stressful. And how would it be if you were a single mom and you ran out of money and baby food? You know, it's easy to go down and steal some food. So Reagan in the 80s closed the jails and basically, I'm sorry, didn't close the jails. I wish he did. He closed the mental institutions. And so thousands and thousands of mentally ill and emotionally challenged individuals were released out into the streets. So you have inequity on top of inequity, basically everywhere. I mean, if you look out on the streets, maybe even in your own, you know, close to your own area, you'll see, when you see someone, again, ask yourself, am I being a bystander? Am I building a bridge, or am I building a wall? Basically, those are the 3 things. Do you actually get out of your comfort zone and go really inquire with the person that you notice and say, hello, how are you? How are you doing? It's not a bad idea, but you'll see that you know, they also have a story, and there's a lot that you can learn just by actually going into areas that are uncomfortable. The ultimate goal for me, anyways, as I did my own practice to stay embodied and come out of my own trauma growing up, was to bring the folks that I met at the local jail to also try to kind of try their best to come back home here. Just keep coming back, keep coming back home, and to get centered and calm, to come to a place of forgiveness and compassion. And we had all kinds of folks coming to the class. So I'd walk in with an escort. So they'd, you know, I'd come down the elevator, regroup. After the second year, I finally just broke down in the elevator going down. I said, dear God, I just don't know if I can do this. I mean, how do I show up? And the message that came through was, Koorosh, be really, really transparent. Be really honest. Be really, really human. Share your human story. Don't try to pretend to be anything that you're not, because they'll know. They'll feel it. They'll see it. And right now, the last thing folks that are going through a challenging time need is someone to try to fix them, someone who tries to judge them, of course, someone who tries to, you know, be the authority figure, you know, or someone who's got a vested interest in building status or fame. I mean, let's face it, we're living in a very commodified society. It's like now mostly about, you know, the media trying to encourage us to press that button, and it's about how many clicks can I get, and how much fame and success can I get, and, you know, even spirituality practices become commodified. So I had to be aware of all those things, because, you know, to drop in and try to do a real effective job, and really, actually benefit myself, I had to be really honest and real. The way we would start usually would be, I sit there, I wait, they would announce, the guards inside would announce to the inmates that the spirituality guide's here, whatever that means, by the way. You know, for me, it was just a label, but it was more like, I'm a hardware kind of a salesman guy with my toolbox, and I've got yoga practice and somatics and improv theater tools, and I had them all available, because you had to be willing to use whatever tool that was appropriate for that person or that group or at that time. And you had to be very spontaneous and very playful and very relaxed in what you brought out. So for example, meditation was a big thing, but not everyone, especially someone who's really in a state of like being in a somatic term I want to use, like in a heightened state of arousal. Like they're in this, you know, stuck in survival mode, traumatized, they were just dragged into the jail. They're like, you know, someone may have gotten shot in front of them. You know, I remember a lady I met, Joni. She says, Koorosh, I just, you know, a couple months ago, I had to jump out of a car that was going 65 miles an hour because I wanted to get away from this person I was in a relationship with. Or there was another lady, Lana, who, she says, Koorosh, you really want to know what I've been through? She kind of rolled up her sleeves and showed me bullet holes everywhere. And she says, I was shot like 27 times. I don't even know how I survived. But I, you know, again, it's the traumas I witnessed with folks at the jail, you know, just was like, all right, God, I really need to know how to show up for this. And it often meant I had to drop in to the place that where they were at, which meant is, you know, which was really, number one, really witnessing them, seeing them for who they were, really having a lot of compassion, and just, it's sort of like transformation through osmosis. You know, it's like I had to stay so calm and so at peace that the energy was calming. I mean, I tried. It wasn't always perfect. In the 10 years, I think I had two situations where I had to have two of the students taken out by the guards, but 99.9% of the time, everyone was happy and cooperative, and excited to get involved with some of the tools that we used. And so aside from meditation, we would use a body scan once in a while, like just get in touch with your hands. So when someone's having an out-of-body experience, just a little bit of like, just take a breath. Feel your hands, feel your feet, get centered by just getting in touch with some part of you. The movement practices were great. We used to do a lot of mirror dance movements. So someone would do a movement and everyone in the class would copy that movement, and we would pause. And sometimes we would do blindfold walk, where we walk together and kind of build trust by saying, look, we may not know where we're going, but we can support one another. And of course, warrior yoga for these young men was so effective, because, you know, you walk in. So I'd go from the women's section and then over to the men's section after about an hour, hour and a half. And the men, you know, we're talking people that, you know, I'm probably 3 times older than most of them. And I had to demonstrate to them that you could find vitality, health, and you know, wellness inside and out through core strength, but not just physical. It's mental, it's your heart, it's your body. And so I developed this practice called warrior yoga, and it was really amazing because we used a lot of strength building and a lot of poses that you hold, and these wonderful young men were just like, they couldn't believe how hard it was and how empowered they felt. We would brainstorm a lot. So it was a lot of brainstorming on what kind of business concepts can we create together that would help really free you. And the thing that came up the most is that a lot of the folks there had a lot of skills. They were focused, they were team builders. When they engaged in criminal activity, they actually had a lot of skills that were applicable in certain businesses. So for example, Johnny in one of the classes said, "Hey, Koorosh, I actually love building bikes, and I didn't want to steal bikes or cars. I mean, why don't we create a business where bike shops donate parts and we build bikes, And I had the same idea from a car thief, and I thought that was brilliant. An elderly woman said, "Koorosh, one of the biggest problems I'm noticing in this world is there's no transitionary support. When we get out," and this was Jody, she says, "when we get out, there's, it's like there's nowhere to go. We're like dropped off at the bus station with $5 or $10 or something like that. And then we're back into that same trauma vortex." And by the way, when you're in an inequity type situation, it's hard to get out of it. Usually if you're in poverty or you're in an environment that's abusive or difficult or challenging, it is so difficult to come back out and then not go back in if you do get out. So Jody's idea was, we need a place, and she was a grandma. She says, we need a place that's like, grandma's house, where people could come after they're released. Only women, though. Men could use it too, but women that come in will make some cookies. We'll give them a care package, some hygiene products, and some pep talk, and give them support. And then they could go out to the next step, which would involve hopefully getting housing and things like that. The brilliant ideas came out of these classes. By the way, I want to say I'm really honored that one of my star colleague students, she was there. She's I'll leave it up to her if she wants to introduce herself, but she was with us for a little bit, and she ended up being my right-hand person in leading meditations, guidance, support. And when I actually left at the end of the day, she would continue the support with the women, keeping them stable mentally, emotionally, physically. She would offer them, remind them of the tools, somatic tools, mindfulness tools. And when she got out, she actually opened up her own business of somatic healing and therapy and counseling. And she's amazing. I'm going to leave it up to her to introduce herself. But we had people like, Mike, who was a cocaine transporter. We had white collar criminals like Henry, who was a hedge fund manager, addicted to cocaine, a domestic abuse situation where Angie were together sitting and asking, well, why are you here? And Angie was shaking. She says, well, I couldn't handle my abuse. And I ended up one night, I was being raped every night. And I just, I took the scissors one night and I just cut my husband's penis off. And I heard this and I'm like, okay, Angie, why would you do this? She says, I just didn't know what else to do. So and she says, I wish I knew what else to do. And so we went over the other options and, what else you can do other than, do things like that. But domestic abuse isn't just men abusing women. It was, there's a lot of other, it's universal. It happens in every way, but it's mostly women who are abused who end up in the jail. We had a contractor who was brought in for terrorism charges, John. I said, what happened, John? He says, Koorosh, I built a house for someone very wealthy. he just wouldn't pay me. He owed me like $300,000-$400,000, and I left a message on his voicemail. And I know I shouldn't have pressed that button. I sent it, and I just said, "Hey, you know what? You need to pay me. You're whatever." He called him a bunch of names, and if I see you, I'm going to wring your neck or something like that. They picked him up, and he's doing so much time for terrorism charge. So I guess the lesson there was really think it through before you click that button or send that email, whatever. Just do a pause. We had a lot of scam artists that were amazing people, and just folks of all walks of life, mostly involved and engaged in their situation as victims of circumstance. And remember, accountability. London Breed's talk today about we all have to be accountable. We have to hold each other accountable. I do want to mention one other young lady who was a daughter of a very prominent, very super wealthy person in Belvedere. I'm trying to remember her name, Diana. She became a professional thief. I mean, every month she was in there, her father would bail her out and she'd come, and I said, why do you keep coming back? She says, I have this disease. I'm addicted to stealing because my father never holds me. He's very wealthy, he's successful, but he comes home, he ignores us. And I just needed to keep getting attention. And so she was with us, and we worked on a lot around just, developing her own set of values and learning how to love herself and hold herself. A lot of tools around the inner child, holding that inner child. And, the bottom line is, I think the main thing that I'm grateful for, I learned a lot. I continue to learn a lot about myself. It didn't end very well. I mean, I went in there with 100% of my dedication, and I feel like, they fired me because they felt I was a threat, and I left. There was no closure. They didn't want to have a conversation with me after they fired me, because I was leading a class and telling everyone you can be free from this situation. Let me show you how. The guard didn't like it, so I got fired. So I feel like I was spit out. But I think we're 45. Yeah, I think we're at the end of this talk. I did want to say, if you transform whatever you're doing into art, creativity, it's a wonderful thing. I've transformed my own creativity. Now that I'm out of working at the jail, I had to continue this work, and we're doing it with theater. And so I'm going to have someone put in there Grandma's $1 Million Scheme in the chat box. Look it up on YouTube about my work at the jail. It's a one-man show at the Marsh Theater. And if I did write a book about managing stress and anxiety, mostly around finances, we'll put that in there. And my email, so you can contact me anytime. But I'd love to hear comments, ideas, questions. Let's have a little conversation. So let's open it up.
I thank you so much. It's great. Could you please, I want you to elaborate on the way in which they just ended your work there, the way you just told us, just illustrate, sort of depict the scene for us, because it's very cinematic from my point of view. Please, and of course painful, please just give us a full picture of it.
Thank you, Ida. It's not what I expected. I gave 10 years of my life. For first year I was paid, then they cut the budget, and I didn't get paid for 9 years. I was willing to go. Thank you, God, for that gift. But what happened at the end of the 10 years, the guards, I think a lot of them just had it with this program. They really didn't want a program that taught folks how to really come back into their wholeness, because it was a threat. And that one day it was raining, and the guard was upset. He didn't like me for some reason, made me wait somewhere for like 20 minutes. And when I complained, he threw a chair at me. And then he says, "You're a threat. Almost like you're a terrorist, and we're going to get you out of here." And they took me out like I was a prisoner myself, just said, "Leave." And I tried to talk, and then that was it. They didn't return calls. They didn't bring any closure. They didn't say thank you. So You know, I left brokenhearted, and I was actually honestly quite depressed for about 6 months, and I had to work through that, of course.
Yes,
And
I know. It was very painful when you told us because from day one, I knew you're working there and I would hear your stories. Yeah. So that's it. So, yeah.
yeah, very, very painful. But I also accepted that this is what I'm dealing with. This is a system, again, that to have complete rehabilitation means no jobs, no money. The $50,000 a year that they're collecting for each inmate will not be coming in. It's a huge threat. That's why need to be punished. Some of them were hardcore, but and supported to be able to go out and be good citizens. And they, most of them who were released after our classes they're quite amazing, actually. I run into them at Whole Foods, at oil changers. And Henry, the derivative guy from Goldman Sachs, got a job at Barnes and Nobles, and he wrote a book about, you know, living simply. So, yeah.
Yeah. And of course, all these names are made up. They're not their real names.
Yes, I can't use their real names, but they're you know, I'm using yes, I had to use
Yeah,
another name.
definitely.
But I want to welcome anyone who has any comments, ideas, suggestions, anything that you feel is useful to add to this conversation. I don't claim to have all the answers. I'm a student as much as I'm a teacher.
So, and I'm reading the question. Okay.
I'm really grateful for this
Tony
opportunity,
Kashani asked, do you feel it was worth it?
and I hope.
Did lives change as a result of your work?
You know, I have to say, again, number one, it was my own path of recovery because, you know, they say, you know, work, you know, teach the stuff you need to work on. And I had, again, so much trauma, so much fear as an immigrant. I felt so much discrimination and prejudice that I felt going into a system like this to help others recover, like the way I try to recover, was a good thing. So you kind of, you feel met and you can meet them as well. And I got to tell you, the reward that I received is unquantifiable. And the price I paid, I can't quantify. It's time, energy, my life, I had to give up my business in San Francisco, which was a mom and pop real estate business. It's still there. Of course, it's taken a nosedive, but it was supporting me to do this. And now I'm using this work to support my business, so I don't actually go out of business. I see another question that says, what do you think the equity in the U.S. prisons and prisons in other countries? Do you think the equity issue is more serious in developing countries? I did want to address that. Thanks for bringing that up. You know, inequity is a universal issue. It's not just here in America. We've got patriarchy in Iran. You've got this Islamic religion running the show and lots of inequities there. Even though I love Iran, it's a very beautiful country and it's got incredible things to offer, but it's universal. This is our human condition that we're trying to shine a light on so that we can transform it and not be taken over by it and then somehow get crushed by it, which is, as we're seeing in America, which is a young country, could have happened very easily not too long ago. You had a group of people with a new narrative, a new story that they wanted to really become a part of the system that goes back 400 years, which is oppression, domination, supremacy. By the way, I did want to touch on policing really took its roots during slavery. When the slave catchers were out like looking for slaves, they suddenly got this clever idea. Hey, you know what? This is a great concept. What a great business. Let's try to monetize this. We'll just build these places and we'll put people in, and now they're black, but maybe we'll put Indians and everyone else and we'll charge money. But I think it's everywhere. But we in America, we are supposed to be the most progressive, I guess. I mean, I wonder, but we're supposed to be setting an example. But again, it begins here at home. So that's all we can do right now, I think. and your neighbors, like invite the Mikes of the world, the people who don't share your views, because if we just hang out with people that just share our views, then maybe we're not going to grow, right? I don't know. Any other questions I'm seeing here? You're talking.
Yeah, I'd love to ask a question. I just also want to elaborate that I think this has been a really amazing experience. Your vulnerability is so appreciated. Your story really resonated with me. I think a lot of us would say we come from trauma backgrounds in whatever capacity that takes, you know, and I think it takes a lot of courage to look within and understand that I have power to change my circumstances, and there's a duty to help other people get there too. Um, so I just kind of wanted to think of this concept of acknowledging our trauma and wanting to heal, but understanding the context of generational trauma and maybe why our parents didn't treat us the way we think we deserve to be treated, or why their parents and vice versa. You know, it just goes on and on and on. So I also want to just kind of challenge and see the perspective of that guard. You know, I don't think it's easy to be in a position of power where you feel like you don't like the reflection in the mirror sometimes. And I would even extend it to like slaughterhouses. People really need to step back and have emotional therapy because like that work is hard. So this idea of generational trauma, of compassion and wanting to understand both sides of the story really could be a powerful tool to facilitate healing, where I may not agree with the way you treat people, I may not agree with your philosophies in life, but I can see a path to collaborate, to understand and work towards the things that we all want in life, which is peace. We want to be happy. We want security in our lives and for our children, friends, and family. So I just would love to continue the conversation. I think this was so amazing. Thank you.
Well said. By the way, first of all, thank you. My God, you know, the generational trauma vortex that we tend to carry on from one generation to the next. Now it's up to us, to, like you were saying, to do the healing and the work to finally end that, to just sever that pattern. Because as you said again so beautifully, that we have a responsibility now to take this light and take it wherever you want to take it. It could be next door, in your town, in the whole country. It doesn't matter how big or small. Just being the change that we want to see in the world is, it's like you said, that's right on. I'm so with you. Now, one last thing. Majority of the guards were amazing. Please don't have that image that I'm like, they're all, no, they're amazing. They walked with me when they escorted me, asked me questions, we joked, we laughed. There's always a few folks who just don't get it, and it's okay. It's the way it is. This is the planet that we're on. So we could be the agents of change for them as well. You know, maybe just hold that center. You know, I did my best. I could have done better as well, but that's the practice, and you know, just do our best.
So thank you so much, Koorosh. We really learned from you. And thank you for your generosity and honesty. And I think everybody like your work with in jail and hearing about your experiences. Now we're at the end of our talk. Koorosh, if you want to add anything, please go ahead.
Yes, please. I just wanted to say, if anyone's interested in continuing this conversation, send me an email to my email at Koorosh Ostowari 1@gmail.com.
Could you please, Koorosh, type it at in chat box?
1@gmail.com, and then what we could do, I did my best to type it properly, but what we could do is stay in touch, and then I'm happy to have more conversations with you, and we can also have a little bit more time together. I mean, this is so important. We could maybe do a couple hour type of a group sharing or practice together that involves some theater games and some mindfulness practice and some whatever, and just keep going deeper. So if you're interested, just send me an email, And I'm happy to keep you up to date and in touch with what happens next. And also I want to hear from you, of course, and your work.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. Students, as I mentioned in the beginning and in the chat box, if you're here for extra credit, make sure to type your name, your class, and your professor's name in the chat box. So I email it to your professor and you'll get credit for your attendance. Thank you so much and have a nice evening. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Blessings.
Thank you.